there's a level to which those substances they can elevate an already good time, or they can be like a social lubricant. And there's other ways that they can become the quick fix for people who don't feel good. Can. And it's the quick fix of, oh, I feel really good right now. Oh, I don't feel as good. I need more of everything that's going to make me just feel really good versus a delayed gratification that helps you find delight or joy. I think the fine line and the near enemy to joy and delight would be pleasure seeking. And if you
Okay.
constantly pleasure seek, you can be on that addictive side, that addictive behavior. I wasn't good at anticipating when I was going to burn myself out at going 100 miles an hour, and I wasn't good at anticipating when I was going to get to 0 miles an hour and I could stay in a different kind of speed. So I think that process opened up the door for me to get more insight into how I operate.
Welcome to Shaken Angles, insights, struggles, failures, and learnings. The world from different angles.
Thank you, Matthew, for being here in
Thank you,
Shaking Angles
Maddie.
and taking the time to share your story with us.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, my name's Matt Gluckman. I am in my mid 30s. I am a personal trainer. I've been training full time for 10 years. I kind of started with a little bit of my own journey first in tackling some of the things that were holding me back. And then it kind of evolved into following my passions along the way and kind of this like one step forward or two steps forward, one step back, kind of like cha-cha dance of, getting rid of jobs or toxicity in my life at the time and finding new positions that resonated with me personally. And then it eventually led me into personal training and helping other people kind of overcome different obstacles in their life, whether it was physical or mental, emotional, in their career or social. Somehow it could always come back into the gym setting and the physical movement setting. All this stuff would come out with working out with clients, right? So, yeah, that's kind of my quick version of my story, essentially.
You faced some struggles. What were those struggles that you faced?
It probably started as a young age. Had a lot of social anxiety, a little bit of like just I guess you'd call it more of like a dysthymia rather than a depression. It was more of like just things didn't really feel as good or look as good. Probably is what a precursor to depression later. So a lot of my struggles were really personal obstacles that I had to overcome. Like I experienced death at a pretty young age, between my grandfathers and grandparents and uncles and aunts and things like that. No one in like my immediate family, but that kind of did make me think about things more and be more like paralysis by analysis in situations. And probably later when my parents got divorced, did it kind of bury this seed of kind of anger and resentment in me that later came out in my early teens and later teens and early 20s, excuse me. And throughout that time, I'd kind of struggled with different periods of substance abuse, alcohol, marijuana, more just like taking things to an extreme where, don't let the medicine become the poison. And it was like me attaching to something that felt good that could kind of cover up any negative feelings or any anger that I was holding on to.
Mhm.
But there's a quote that's like, sometimes in life you have to get hit by a 2x4, and then you have to get hit by a 4x8, and then you have to get hit by a steamroller before you kind of wake up and change. And so I kind of think that was a little bit my story, because then it was when I first started getting into personal training and feeling more comforted in terms of what I was doing with myself in my life. That first year, I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and I was put in the hospital for a week. And so again, that was like the steamroller of like, okay, I have to change something. I can exercise as much as I want, eat as clean as I want, but if something is wrong, kind of systematically in my neural circuitry and my mental emotional awareness of myself, I there's nothing I can do to like overcome that. That's constantly hold me back. That's like
Mhm.
basically if I was canoeing on a boat, but boat would fill up with water and I was bailing the water out of the boat, but I wasn't plugging the hole, if that makes sense. So ulcerative colitis really was the wake up call for me
Okay, I
to
was going to ask that. What was a
ye-
shake-up moment? So it was a
Yeah, I would say that ulcerative colitis was for sure because doing that deep dive and understanding it more, it had to do its physical representation had to do with the precursors of the way my body was handling stress and some of my
Mhm,
perspectives on things and holding on to like anger or holding on to viewpoints that were causing more internal stress. So that was definitely the shake-up moment, and that's definitely like the steamroller that made me kind of have to do the deep dive internally, look within, and heal within, and kind of start to pause and reflect on things rather
mhm.
than be so reactionary to things. If that
Yeah,
makes
it's
sense.
impressive how we live our life reacting to everything. And how did
Yeah.
you look inside of yourself? How did you
Hmm.
deep in it?
I think that you have to be open to when it comes about, when the thought comes or the emotion comes, when the trigger that you've had buried in you comes. I think that emotions that are buried alive never die. So they almost come back when they've been
Mhm,
triggered, essentially. And so I think it was a process, but I think things like exercise and meditation and running, I think they help bring those to light. It's interesting. I just find that because I'm able to like push myself to these depths physically, it's also pushing myself mentally to this space. And it does help me, it helps them almost again like come to light and I get to release them a little bit. Like I always joke with people, like they always talk about the gym is about gains, 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 what you're gaining. And I'm like, this is more like the dump. This is where you come to let go of your tension, to let go of the
wow, yes.
anxieties. You know what I mean? Like, so
How
I've always
good
viewed, say it again.
how good I mean, I like that way how you see what's the gym, because
Yeah.
and that's where I see we have a lot of definition, right?
Mhm.
Some for some people going to the gym is getting better, but in the sense
Mhm.
like physically, and the way how you have to find what is going to the gym for you, I really like it because it's a moment of for you reflection,
Yeah.
growth, right?
And it was like back to like the emotions that are buried alive never die. For a period of time, my only outlet for stored frustration and anxiety and aggression was physically moving, running, lifting. Now I can have an outlet for those things with like writing or taking my dog for a walk or practicing piano or like I've developed different outlets for those, you know what I mean? But I think it is important for people to recognize the capability that can come from physical movement. And for me, in my personal journey, it was very much, when I got stuck mentally, when I could do something physically, it would almost provide this clarity in my head of like, oh my gosh, why did I sit there and think I was just going to think really hard about it and sulk in it before it ever happened or after it happened and fix it? Like, and I'm a firm believer that action leads to insight. I don't think insight leads you to action. So
Mhm.
I feel like I feel like doing something is always beneficial. Like Albert Einstein talked about, the best way to solve a problem is to walk away from it for a little bit and then come back to it. So I've always kind of valued that in terms of, I don't have to sit here and solve my problems, but if I go and do something else that I want to do with my day, whatever activity that may be, usually the solution comes to me in the process.
No, I get what you mean. And I agree with you. I think in some sort of way I have lived as well that a lot of time we put a lot of pressure and we want to stay there and solve it and do the work. But actually when we relax and go, I would say for a walk, but to me personally, what it works sometimes, I love dancing
Nice.
and and I have gone either to dance in any scenario because at some point I was thinking like dancing was only in parties, and then when I realized of that big connection with that I have with the dancing, I started having different environments where I can dance, still reflect that and no go for the party. And it's nothing wrong with the party, but we cannot be partying every day, right?
Right, right, right.
In
It's
that moment, it really helped me to connect or have that clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's movement. You know what I mean? It's not like it has to be lifting weights or going for a run. It's just any type of movement. Dance, yoga, tai chi, just any type of body movement it sometimes is the release that we needed, because they
Mhm.
can even talk about, like, some massage therapists are really good at being like, oh, you have tension in this muscle, you must be carrying stress from yesterday, or you must be worried about XYZ. And they really can kind of tie into what emotion you're stuck in to how your body is expressing itself. So just by moving sometimes can release that tension too, like physically. So yeah, and I think what happens is we do just get caught up. It's almost like if you've ever used ankle weight, you take them off and you feel faster and lighter. And in reality, you're probably not moving any faster. You're not really that much lighter. It's just like this thing that happens. So like when we're driving 60 miles an hour, and we have our busy day from 8 to 5, and then we come home, and like that's just, we're like stuck in that speed. And I think we can get caught up in thinking patterns that aren't serving us, or emotions that aren't serving us in that same speed. And then when we can slow ourselves down with, you know taking our time to dance, taking our time for self-care, like a workout or a walk or a run or meditation, you slow down and you can kind of like, oh, why am I holding on to that? That's not helpful. And you can start to release some of these things that you've picked up throughout the day.
That's amazing. No, I totally agree with you. It really sounds that is something that we have to find a way how to bring it on,
Yeah.
in a way how to connect with ourselves. So it's really good that you ended up, connected to the fitness and but what do you do? Like what services do you offer?
So I do online personal training and coaching, where I handle people's workouts, nutrition. We talk about kind of like their stresses, their sleep, and we try to get them to better habits and behaviors that lead them to their goal. So basically, it is an online training platform. Yes, essentially, I do like all things health, but my foot in the door is with the exercise component. But yeah, it's like training and coaching is what I do in person and online.
Oh, excellent. And what made you connect with that area, with that industry?
I think it was, remember that, like, kind of that cha-cha I was talking about, like two step, one back, two step, one back.
Hmm.
In that kind of process, I'd always come back to like really liking something physically I was doing. I worked for a moving company. I liked that I was physically moving my body. But then I worked for different sales companies, and I liked working with people, but I didn't like just pushing a product that I didn't believe in. I think eventually the two worlds kind of came together. And I remember, after college, I had done, 5 or 6 different jobs, and I was in the gym just kind of feeling a little lost, like, man, what do I want to do with my life? And I remember being in the gym like, oh my gosh, I know what I need to do. Like, I need to help people with this side of things. So this is what I like. And this is kind of my foot in the door to talk about everything into this person's life. So yeah, I guess it kind of scratched an itch. I'd always kind of been like a student athlete. I found more peace on the soccer field than I did in the classroom. I think it was because at the time it was like meditation with training wheels. Like when you're sprinting,
Wow.
or when you're wrestling, or when you're moving weight, like you can't think about other things. But the moment I was outside of a sport or outside of physical activity, all the negative thinking, or the stresses, or the memories, or the future, fantasies would come back. But then all of a sudden I'd go to play my sport again, and it was peace.
Wow. Yeah, it's a kind of meditation. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Just like dance, you're not like thinking about what you did yesterday and what's stressing you out yesterday when you're dancing. You're probably just in the moment.
correct, correct. So how much do you value, or what would you tell people how valuable is moving the body?
A staple. Movement is medicine. Yeah, I think it's crucial. It's a critical component. It's almost like, yeah, it's just as valuable. There's some people who think like, oh, all the mental stuff is just made up. All you have to do is worry about your physical self, and then ignore the mental component. You can't do that either. Like you have to, it's all spirit, mental, and
Hmm.
your thinking mind, your heart, and kind of your body. You need to take care of all three of those.
Yeah, correct. Matt, what else make you to look inside or dig inside of you? How use the different ways, how to connect with yourself and find that clarity?
it didn't happen without professionals. Like I've been in and out of therapy my whole life, and I will always kind of use a professional counselor to consult with from time to time. I think that needs to be said. You know, even Tom Brady had one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best athletes, had a performance coach, a psychologist, and his name was Greg Harden. And he was a guidance counselor originally, and then he became like a sports psychologist at Michigan State, one of the best sports psychologists, and talking about
Mhm.
performance, mental performance. So I think having someone in your corner is always beneficial. And that doesn't have to be a professional all the time. It can be, you know, friends, and it can be a spouse, but I think it's also good to kind of have that third party perspective, someone who's not tied into your social networks, and also someone who's, you know, it's not everyone's job to be able to analyze what's going on in your particular life. The reason I bring this up is because there's a great quote that you can't read the label when you're in the jar. So when we're
Mhm.
experiencing things, we can only really look at it from a bird's eye view so much. But then getting that true kind of undivided attention, outside perspective, can just shed light and help us gain more perspective. So that's number one. That's number one. I think number two is an analogy that comes from Jack Cornfield that I learned from him. And it's basically like a form of cognitive behavior therapy. And the reason I bring this up is because I definitely struggled with that. I talk about that kind of that like cha-cha dance of feeling like, oh, I'm going forward, I'm progressing, and then I'm regressing. And there were periods where I could trust my brain, I could trust my positive thinking, I could trust my intuition. And then there were periods where my brain was actually my worst enemy. And it was ping
Mhm.
pong from negative thoughts about myself and negative viewpoints about myself. And I had to be able to almost dissect that and say, whoa, 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 you can't believe everything you think, but you need to find a good T chart to decide what thought do you want to keep and continue to water that seed, and what thoughts are causing toxicity and trauma in your life that you need to, you know, get rid of. And so the analogy rain is recognize, allow, inspect, and not attach. And the reason I think this is so important is because when the recognize and allow is the first step, because what we resist persists, and tension only creates more tension. When we are trying to live our best life and some looming negative emotion or thought or experience is coming at us, and we push it away, and we're just like, let's push out all negativity
Mhm.
and let's just cling to all positive, it causes more problems later on. You know, you got to
Mhm.
be able to kind of flow with it, the yin and the yang, and be able to take that negativity and almost use that as the fuel, right? I talked about getting to the gym and releasing that energy. You churn that stuff into the fuel for your garden to grow a beautiful flower of the life that you're trying to grow. So I think there's actually a great Carl Jung quote. He talks about this. He's like, you know, enlightenment isn't just because you're imagining light and avoiding all the dark. It's until you make the the unconscious conscious, is when you kind of can incorporate them together and really truly direct your life.
Wow. No, it's totally true because the problem with the negativity is when it's conscious and it's just staying in our mind and we don't even recognize what's happening. Why am I feeling like this?
Right. And I've had periods in my life where I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like angry for the last week, or I was depressed for the last month. You know what I mean? And it like catches you. And the science behind that is, this neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor. She found that an emotion will live in our neural circuitry for like 90 seconds to 2 minutes unless we fuel it with more thinking, in which case we can live in that thought and emotion for like decades. So it's amazing how our thinking can fuel it. And so back to the rain analogy really quick, like recognize, allow, like, okay, I'm going to allow that emotion in, I'm going to allow those feelings in. You investigate into it, like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I believing that? Is that self-belief true? And then the N is really important, where you non-attach, you separate yourself from the emotion. You know, how many times do people say, like, I'm angry, I am the emotion anger? No, you're not. You're just
Mhm.
experiencing anger. Like, it's part of the human experience. We all have this ability where we're going to have four basic human emotions: anger, fear, sadness, and joy. So the problem isn't the emotion that you experience, it's more of the symptom. The problem would be how you express it. And now, can you churn
Mhm.
that in a way that makes this beautiful life in front of you, or is it leading you to behaviors and consequences that are holding you back from your overall goals?
Matt, and you mentioned, I forgot the name, sorry, the behavior recognize
Um,
aloud,
Rain, the rain analogy,
rain,
RAIN.
rain analogy. Okay, and what were the last three steps?
The last three steps were investigate and not attach. So first step is recognize. Then the A is allow the emotion in, allow the thought in. I is investigate into it, and then
Mm,
N is not attach. Separate yourself from it. It's not who you are. It's just a
wow,
part of your experience.
really powerful that analogy.
Thank you.
Not
I wish I could
attach.
say it was mine, but I do have to cite Jack Cornfield on that one. He came up with that analogy, and I think it's super helpful. And I think really what it comes down to for me, what has led the most help, like you had a good question on your prompt before we got on air here, and it was about like who was said kind of one of the hardest things for me to hear in at different times in my life. And I thought about that and I wrote a few down, but really ultimately the hardest thing to hear was some of the self-talk that was going on internally. And so I think if there's anything that I am kind of like trying to impart on the world in terms of my particular story and experience was I cling to wisdom, and it was helpful for me to have things that were accessible, right? Like rain. I can remember that when I'm crying because tears, water, rain, okay, helps me use it in the moment. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
these things, these tools are useless unless you really know how to apply them or when to apply them. So for me, like I've just always loved quotes because they could condense knowledge into like a single sentence and it would resonate with you in such a way that there was no conflict, between your heart and mind. So it just felt right. It felt like, okay, this is something I can gravitate to and attach to because yeah, it can be confusing out there. There can be a lot of mixed messages. And like you were saying before, we know we're kind of conditioned in different ways. And I think as we first start to kind of wake up or become more open-minded and light, we start to like pick apart these conditions. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing them? I think in that aspect or in that process, sometimes we can throw away too much. And I think that's why it's important to have like a scaffolding of things that you're going to try to keep and things that you're going to try to work towards so that you can live your best life. It's really just for each
Yeah.
individual.
And that's the most important, live our best life, like be comfortable with us. And Matt, you have mentioned a couple of times the negative self-talk. What kind of things were you telling to yourself?
Um, are we allowed to curse on this one, or should we keep it PG rated? No, but I'm teasing. But that's kind of how it would be, though. I mean, it would be almost like a perfection complex of any mistake I made, I would just beat myself up, and anything that I was
Mhm.
gonna try to do, I might have already told myself I was not gonna do it, and then remember all the reasons why I wasn't good at something or that I previously have failed, and it almost felt like it was a spiral staircase and all it took was like one negative thought to take hold and then it was like I fell down the staircase. So it may have started with like, oh, you just walked in front of somebody or you just turned that in late or you didn't perform well, and then it would just kind of like a domino effect go from there,
Okay.
and until it was like spiraling out of control, and it was like you're never going to amount to anything, like you're not destined for greatness, like you're better off dead, you're a piece of it. I mean, yeah, I mean there was a lot of that repetitive thinking and just feeling like just no belief in my own ability. And yeah, I mean I don't think I'm not just probably being repetitive, but yeah, I mean I think it just stemmed from a low poor self-image, a low self-efficacy, a low belief in myself, and then a self-deprecation. It was like the only way I could feel good is if I beat myself up and then, dealt with that, and that would make me feel validated somehow. it was very an unhealthy pattern. But that's what ultimately I had to break. It was me holding me
Mhm.
back. And that's why it's so fascinating. But quotes like there's nothing that can harm you worse than your own mind untrained gravitates to me so much and resonates with my story so much. And then nothing can comfort you better than your own mind trained. Like your mind is a terrible master, it's a better servant. You don't want, I like to think that thoughts are like driving with a child. You can't let them grab the steering wheel, but you can't stuff them away in the trunk either. You have to find a way of coexisting.
Yeah, correct. Look, I asked that because for very long time, I couldn't even recognize that I was having that self-talk, that
Yeah,
negative.
right.
And I think the most important moment is when we recognize that we actually are doing it, like we are experiencing that.
That's such a good point because that's the hardest part to do is to get that self-reflection. I think you have to be willing to look at yourself, and I think that's the hardest part to do, right? Because you're already like beating yourself up so much internally that the last thing you want to do is try to investigate and analyze more. But it's almost like if you can start to try to get that bird's eye view perspective, kind of like almost getting out of yourself in a way, like
Mhm.
not making it so about you and kind of looking at the bigger picture of the environment you're in. Maybe everyone was different, but I think that is what kind of helped me start to see like, oh, I'm not only bad, like because I'm not only leading myself to bad situations, but I'm also kind of negatively affecting the people around me. And that was a little bit more of a wake up call as well.
Why do you think that was happening? Like you were affecting the environment around you?
I think I had I had a really short mental bandwidth. I had a lot of stress on my plate, and it felt like I had done it to myself. So because of putting all these added pressures on myself of feeling like, oh, my parents and my family are dead to me, like I don't want to even talk to them. I'm just gonna go do like live my life by myself. I don't need anybody. My back's up against the wall, me against the world type of situation. It just made everything that much stressful and made my response to things that much more inaccurate. But things like medication or meditation, I think provide a space. Like when you're breathing and you're just sitting there breathing, you're literally creating more of a field for your brain and emotionality and mentality to contain. And again, I think it goes into it flips the script. Instead of something that engulfs you, like an emotion that engulfs you, you have this big mind like a sky, and that emotion is like a little cloud within it. And you can start to work with it. It starts to become more workable because again, you've kind of had that space away from things, and it's expanded that mental bandwidth I talked about from the beginning, which then opens up room for a different perspective on things, recognizing
Mhm.
the action you need to take in correcting things.
Yes, definitely meditation. I think it creates that space where we can connect with the feelings and have that. Look, it's different to say, but I would say have the different perception. Connect with a different side of the situation
Right, right.
because the situation is the same, right? And I think what it changes is the way how we look at things.
I think if you don't like a particular situation, you can do something about it. And if you can't do anything about it, then you have to learn to accept it. You have to learn to change your perspective on it. I love the serenity prayer, which is, grant me wisdom to know the difference and strength to accept what I cannot change. I just butchered that, but it's basically along that concept of, you need courage, strength, and wisdom. Wisdom to help you delineate between what's serving you and what's not, and to
Mhm.
know if there's something you need to take action on or there's something you need to change your perspective on. Because how often do you get into situations where we can say, oh, that's bothering me. Like, is it bothering you? Like the sound is just there, or the person is just there. Are they really bothering you, or is you bothering you? Is the way it's resonating in turn bothering you? So fix something with you. They tell people in AA, you can't change the world around you. You can't make everybody in the world stop drinking alcohol. You are essentially in the way you interact with alcohol or with other people who drink alcohol. So I think it's just yeah, you have like two choices. You can either take action and do something about it. So with a loving energy, not added tension or anger, fear, sadness, jealousy. We already have enough of that as is. If you're going to take action, do it out of love. But if you can't take any action on something, then you need to let go of the perspective that you're carrying on it, because if it's holding you back, if it's something that you're continually returning to with poor emotions, that's making you lose your present.
Matt, at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that you abuse from substances, alcohol, marijuana, and you were connecting that to the emotions. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, definitely. There's a level to which those substances they can elevate an already good time, or they can be like a social lubricant. And there's other ways that they can become the quick fix for people who don't feel good. So if this is your baseline neutral and you're down here and you take a substance to get above your neutral so you can get to feeling good, well, when that substance is out of your system, you're going to come below where you were before. So you're actually going to probably get an adverse effect drinking more and drinking more days and drinking earlier in the day or smoking weed every day, because you can't actually get to that feel good state without the substance. And I think that's the medicine can
Sorry,
become the
Matt.
poison.
Can you repeat the adverse effect when you are having the substance? It's because it was cut off. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So basically, what I was saying is they can have some positive effects in terms of being a social lubricant or help elevate an already good time. But the problem is when we seek these substances that are outside of our body, we can create dependencies on them, like little emotional dependencies. And if this is my neutral, if this is my baseline of how I feel, and this is at zero, again, neutral, and I'm down here before I use the substance, and it gets me above here, it gets me feeling good, gets me feeling like I want to party, I feel loving. Well, eventually when that substance has played its half-life in your system and it's processed out, you're going to come back down, actually sometimes further than where you were before you started. So you have like an adverse effect where you can feel worse. And the
Mhm.
problem is when you get to a dependency on that, if you can recognize that and say, okay, I'm going to go for a run tomorrow and eat well and meditate and go for a walk and get myself back to feeling good naturally, that's different. But most people don't do that. They go for the quick fixes that they did when they first used the substance. So they use it as a crutch, and it becomes their medicine for feeling good about the day, but then it's become the poison because it's also the overuse that's leading to that negative
Mhm.
adverse effect of feeling below the baseline. So it's if you can get something in moderation and you can, I mean, the first person who lived to 100 was actually in like the 1400s, and he drank like 4 to 6 ounces of wine a day. And he talks about, his book is all about just temperance, self-control. If you can have self-control, that's great. But I think the problem is when people deal with mental disorders, anything ranging from anxiety to depression, any developmental disorder, if you feel like you're stuck somewhere in life, I think these substances sometimes become more of the poison than the medicine. And it's actually holding you back than it's letting you become who you're destined to be. Because yes, marijuana, helps lower your anxiety levels, but it also like deflates your motivation, right? It makes you feel like you're happy just exactly where you are. And you should feel that naturally.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
recognize that if you were going to use that consistently every single day, that there's going to be the negative consequence of lack of drive and motivation and desire to go out and do things. So I just think that's where you have to be really careful with things, because it's just, in the end of the day, life is a balance. If
Mhm.
you can stay balanced with things and you can live through your highest vibration and live your best life, all the power to you, more the power to you. As long as you're not harming yourself or others, I don't think there's a problem with it.
How can we naturally get the same effect than, for example, marijuana or alcohol?
I would argue exercise, meditation, going for a walk. I think a lot of
Okay.
these things are just
Movement.
delayed gratification, because even when we're on our phone, when I scroll from one thing to the next, it's another dopamine hit. It's back to
Mhm.
that baseline, and I go above, and I just come back down. And then I scroll again, and then I come back down. And it's that addictive behavior again. And it's that quick fix of, oh, I feel really good right now. Oh, I don't feel as good. I need more of everything that's going to make me just feel really good. versus a delayed gratification that helps you find delight or joy. I think the fine line and the near enemy to joy and delight would be pleasure seeking. And if you
Okay.
constantly pleasure seek, you can be on that addictive side, that addictive behavior side. But when you do things more for joy and delight, it's that delayed gratification where maybe it's, and they even talk about this in the science around doing an ice bath, like a cold plunge. They talk about how it's a delayed dopamine elevation that then stays with you longer before it comes back down to neutral. So I think finding ways that deliver that delayed gratification is the secret. And it could mean getting a skateboard and skating down the sidewalk every day after work because that gives you the most joy and, calm in your day. It
Mhm.
could mean putting on some music and dancing first thing in the morning because you want to set the tone for the day to just be loving and positive. I think it's about taking the principles or taking what worked for people in their journey and finding a way that it can relate to your particular story. I love this quote by Bruce Lee. He just says, absorb what's useful, discard what's useless, and add what is uniquely your own. And I love that. I think that
I
kind of
love it.
encompasses everything.
You really like quotes, and I think I'm gonna take that from this conversation. Take the quotes that it really empower us and connect with ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to like compile all my favorite quotes together because I love them so much. It's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, so you get to kind of like have a little bit of a remembrance of this great life, like someone like Bruce Lee, um, or Alvin Toffler or Viktor Frankl or Booker T. Washington or Rumi, all these people, and you get to kind of like go down the rabbit hole really quick and grab this beautiful thing of wisdom out. And
Mhm.
yeah, I wouldn't be anywhere without some of these great minds that have lived before me, kind of leaving a trail for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's so almost funny these little bits of wisdom like stand the test of time, and somebody can be talking about something that happened in a different generation, a different society, different set of perspectives back then, and it still resonates today sometimes. I think that can be really
Yeah.
fascinating. And I think what happens too when you're someone who's going through trauma and you're in like a really dark space, it's hard to see what's true and what's not true. It's hard to see what's the thread that you pull at, what's the one that you follow out of the room. And for me, things that have provided me comfort have always been quotes that, sure, they have something to teach you, but they almost personify something bigger than myself. And because of that, it gets me out of myself and allows me to resonate with something that feels true, almost like a universal truth,
Mhm.
like this quote here is, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. I mean, it just resonates with like, okay, that makes so much sense. And it helps me recognize like, I keep viewing it like a problem, like I need to solve it today rather than just living. And you start to like see the truth behind some of the, I guess, little golden nuggets of truth that are out there that you can start to piece together and build your world around. So yeah, I just think it's hard to who to trust, right? Like you're like, can I trust my parents? Can I trust society? Can I trust my background influences from my upbringing or from my culture, from my country? And you start to just question all these things. And I think when you can find that lowest common denominator factor of what reigns true to you, whether that's believing in love or believing in wisdom or believing in connectivity, something positive that echoes with your soul and your heart, I think you start to then build your successful life out of that. And that's like the foundation. And that helps get you out of that dark space.
Mhm. Who do you trust
I
at the moment?
trust, that's a good question. I'd say I trust a lot of people. I trust my wife, I trust my family, I trust my friends, I trust my clients. Yeah, I trust in wisdom, I trust in love. I think those are the two things that
Mm.
are the biggest ones that I trust.
Matt, you mentioned that the biggest shake-up moment was when you had or you were diagnosed with, could you repeat the name of,
Ulcerative colitis. Yeah.
can you briefly tell us what is that?
Yeah, it's a digestive disease. It's kind of like Crohn's disease where essentially my body is doing two things. It's overreacting to different stimulus that's inside, and it gets extra inflamed. And then it also its immune system, instead of attacking something that is problematic, like a sick cell or something, it attacks itself. So that's basically what ulcerative colitis is.
Okay. And when you have that checkup moment that you said that it was the turnover point, right? Um, how did
Mhm.
you overcome all the situation? How you were able to start looking inside? How was the process for you?
Slow. I would say it was very slow. You know, it's been 10 years in the making, and I don't want anyone to think that it ever ends. You just get better at things, and I think that learning curve kind of like exponentially increases. So like I would say like my first years, it was very slow improvements in terms of actually seeing results from some of the changes I was making. And then later as I got better at things, more solidified with my kind of newfound perspective on things and my new habits and behaviors and thinking patterns, I was able to kind of really feel and live the success that I was trying to build. I think it's always important that you should be a lifelong learner. You should always recognize that there's going to be more to work with, and you know it's not about there's no like enlightened people. There's no like this perfect symbol that you just get to and then stop. There's enlightened moments, and that's all you're looking for. You're just looking for more and more enlightened moments as you age. So don't fool yourself that you're ever going to be this like enlightened person and all your problems are going to go.
Yeah, it's a process. And I like it that you put it like in that way because it's true. We have to be comfortable going through it and taking a step and improve. And as you said before, sometimes we feel like we have progress and then we're back, maybe 100
Yeah,
step back.
and I think what held me back too was my perspective of what that success looked like, and it almost
Mhm.
felt like I I was looking at other people like, oh my gosh, they're so perfect, and in reality, you know, you meet these people and like they're just humans like us. They have problems, they have good days and bad days, and I started to see that, oh wow, there is so much of it is a choice. It's just like born with it or you're not born with it. It's the choices that you make each day that make the biggest difference.
It's easy to judge sometimes from the outside, say like, oh, that's perfect. I want their life, or not their life, but the way how they are. But inside, there are so many things that we are not looking at it, and I think we have to, when we recognize that, is when we start, respecting each person, each different process, and accepting our own.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I wanted to go back to the point where we break the pattern of thinking or having the self-talk, the negative self-talk. You mentioned something that is
And
was there anything that helped you to break and create that pattern?
along the way, I learned either little bits of knowledge that helped me, like these quotes. You know, I have like a library of, you know, over 100 quotes that I think really have helped me over the years. Just again, having different perspectives. But I think some of the other thing was there's a cognitive dissonance triangle. If you look that up, it's basically a triangle that shows like thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. And it's like a diagnostics tool because you'll be able to see, are my thoughts, my behaviors, and my feelings, are they all connected, right? Are they all in line with
Mhm.
each other? Or is my action different than my feelings and my thoughts? Or is my thoughts different than my feelings and my actions? And if there's a dissonance in that triangle, maybe there's a disconnect in your system somewhere. There's a disconnect in the way that you're thinking to the way that you're behaving and to some belief that you may be holding on. So I think using that triangle is a great way to identify um, things that need more investigation. Now, there's another thing that's useful that it's called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it breaks down basically our psychological needs and what can cause stress. And I think again, these are identifying tools because it's almost like using an Apple Watch or a Fitbit. It's a good idea to use these, but also to use them as a tool to get better at reading your body and really recognizing like, oh my gosh, Is my heart rate increased? Check my watch. Yes, it is. Okay, I'm stressed about something or I'm feeling uneasy about something, right? So you use these as tools, almost like training wheels to get better understanding of your system. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs lets you understand, are my basic needs met? Are food, water, shelter met? Okay, is my, care and belonging? And what it does is I think it helps you consolidate your energy and allow to expand that mental bandwidth, because once you can kind of identify where your stresses are coming from, it can be a little bit freeing, and you can have more of that space that neither and I were talking about earlier, at being able to work with more things. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs was helpful. And then there's also a wheel of emotions chart. And I think back to how, like, my mom was a school psychologist. So she had like a little chart on the board. It was a magnet, and it had probably 50 different emotions on it with a little square, a magnet that you'd put on top of it. And it would just sit on the fridge and be like, how are you feeling today? And I never used it. I never like, moved the thing around, but it was funny to look at, to see the facial expressions of these little icons. But it also got me more in tune with my mental emotional health, and recognize when
Mhm.
things aren't well. And I think it's important that, we talked about earlier, having the outlets, whether it's gym or dance, but you need to know when to apply those. And if you can recognize, like, oh, I'm getting really anxious, or I'm getting really frustrated, I need to take a break, or I have all this pent up energy, I need to go take a break and go for a walk, or whatever it may be, you can apply your outlet to recognizing what your system needs. And again, I think these tools, between Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the dissonance triangle, the wheel of emotions, and the rain analogy, they're all just tools to get better at being you. And when I've ever thought of the overall goal, it's come down to two definitions, and one's by Deepak Chopra, and he calls it effortless spontaneity. And I love that description. It's like you live from a place of effortless spontaneity when you can. And then the other one that goes hand in hand with this one, that I learned from one of my therapists, was unobstructed self-expression. Right? How many times do you feel like you've gone to something and you're held back from a doubt, from a fear, from anxiety, from, low belief in your ability? So when you can get to a place of unobstructed self-expression, spontaneity, I think you've done a better job at finding synchronicity in your mental, emotional, and physical and spiritual well-being.
Look, I think you have really well synchronized all those tools.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
You have mastered them. I think
Well,
so.
it's Tuesday. They'll fall apart by Thursday, but Monday and Tuesday they're really good.
Look, it's been, I guess, I think also a process for you to get all of them, in some sort of synchronicity.
Yeah.
If you are to choose, for example, for someone who is in that difficult situation and they're just starting, what would be the most important for you? Like the one that you would definitely suggest you should be starting with this one and then bringing on the next one and so on.
I think it would be something about, like, you're perfect the way you are, but, be proud of what you have right now while working towards what you want, and recognize that it's not going to happen. It's all, it doesn't happen all at the same time overnight. It's going to be bit by bit, and a little bit of effort's going to go a long way, but don't lose belief in your ability just because it's a long road. And yeah, I think that would kind of sum up where I'd want people to go, because you hit the answer with your question of, like, it does have to be bit by bit. I think we can add so much anxiety to our plate when we really try to imagine our whole life all at once. So there's another great quote, and I know I'm full of quotes, but it's just who I am. The best thing about the future is it comes one day at a time. So that should take a little bit of pressure off. Like, okay, I just have to make it through today. That's all you have to do. Just make it through today. And then worrying won't fix tomorrow's problems, but it'll ruin your peace right now. So again, I want you to be able to be making steps toward the fruitful future that you deserve, but don't let that process rob you of loving the moment you're in right
I love it. It really gave me peace, seriously. because
Cool.
I come to from a place where I tend to try to apply everything, and at some point I recognized that I was putting way too much pressure on trying to learn
Yeah.
everything at the same time.
Yeah.
And the way how you have just explained it in the quotes that you have recalled, it really releases, at least on me, I hope for you that are listening to this, also giving you some sort of clarity and peace. Because look, I think that's the most important thing. I mean, that's what we need to live our best life, to live happy, fulfilled,
Yeah.
enlightened.
Yeah.
You just before were mentioning about reading your body, learning to read your body, your own body.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you learn how to read your body? Did you have a specific
Um,
moment where you said, or you started connecting with it?
I think it started with just being physically aware of my body, in terms of putting my headphones in and going for a workout. Definitely building like a mind muscle connection in the exercises I was doing, and kind of sculpting my body was important for me because I was my kind of more concrete beliefs behind my maladaptive belief of feeling like I was not good enough was feeling like I was weak or feeling like I was inadequate. And I was like 120 pounds soaking wet at 5'7". So it was important for me to build strength, to build up my body, to build up my physique, for that emotional, mental well-being. And I think that started to read my body physically. It did not start the reading my body emotionally until probably until the last maybe 4 or 5 years. And I actually hired this somatic sensory coach, which is basically guided meditation work. I was having some reoccurring physical ailments along with my ulcerative colitis, basically digestive issues along with reoccurring pains in like my neck and my knee. And he had me do different techniques. I worked with him for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And that again was like training wheels. It started the process of me getting better at reading my emotions. And he recognized that, okay, Matt, you're really good at recognizing when you're like, if the analogy would be like a tire, you're really good at recognizing when the tire is like overinflated, got more air in it than it needs, and you're good when you know your tire is flat. But you have no gauge for in between. So to me, or if you look at like speed, and I was good at going 0 miles an hour. I wasn't good at anticipating when I was going to burn myself out at going 100 miles an hour, and I wasn't good at anticipating when I was going to get to 0 miles an hour and I could stay in a different kind of speed. So I think that process opened up the door for me to get more insight into how I operate and what stress level I carry with myself from day to day and what energy I am or I guess what energy or what vibration I'm
Mm.
experiencing in different scenarios and maybe throughout the day, like am I starting my day off at 100 miles an hour because I'm gonna crash, before 2 o'clock, and I think it's another aspect to then slow things down even further and just sit and be with your emotions, be with yourself. You don't want life to pass you and then recognize that you've been holding on to this fear or this reoccurring belief about yourself that's held you back for the last 5, 10 years. Get rid of those thoughts and beliefs now before they've led you and wasted too much time. They've led you down a road you don't want to go down.
I'm totally with you. It's impressive how we could, or how many signs we're receiving, right? Constantly
Yeah.
with from our body, and the energy that we have, the level, how we are, reacting, but we tend to be so disconnected from it. At least that was
Yeah.
for me.
No,
Um,
totally. It's totally like feeling, we get disconnected from ourselves. We get wrapped up in our day to day. I think we're like a modern human being, a modern version of ourselves. If you think about kind of like our survival biases and the way our neural circuitry work, we weren't meant to process all this information that we do in modern culture. Like with everything that we do, I think the average person, yeah, they say that the average brain consumes about 34 gigabytes of data daily. So You know, I mean, it's just so easy for us to get wrapped up in our lives and our routines that it can be easily forgotten to take time to self-care and easily forgotten to have a period of time where you almost like dump this thing out, dump out all the sand that built up in your brain and make room
Slow
for,
down.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
No,
exactly.
you mentioned it, and it's totally true. Like it's very important for us to slow down and take that breath.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, it's being really nutritious, this conversation.
Nairi, thank you so much. I can't talk unless someone asks the good questions and probes the right way. And I really appreciate this conversation. I think you asked a lot of good questions that helped bring out some good information that I hope helped other people.
No, it will. It will. It's already helping me.
Oh, thank you. That just made my day. I'm glad.
Yeah, no, and I really mean it. I usually ask for 3 takeaways, and I don't know. Do you want to share 3 takeaways? And I wanted to,
Like
at least for myself, I want to say the most important takeaway that I'm taking today is the rain analogy. I know all
I
of them
love
that
it.
you have mentioned. They are really good,
Hmm.
and definitely something that it will be worth, taking a read about it and understanding how we can apply or how that could work better for each of us. But the rain analogy, I think it was very easy to take it, and then it's going to be easy to apply it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for me, it was so easy to remember because I needed that analogy usually when anger and tears were around, and usually they went hand in hand. So when I was in the darkest depths of feeling like you're in a depressed prison, tears and thought made me think of the rain analogy and helped me get back in the driver's seat. Um, but I do have some takeaways. You mean like takeaways from my journey, essentially, like my story? Is that what you mean? Three
Yeah.
takeaways?
Oh.
Okay. I have said a lot of some of my takeaways, but I think one of the other takeaways would be, you need three things in life. One to keep you healthy, one to build your wealth, and one to keep you creative. And I've really tried to live my life by that quote in terms of allocating my time. I freed up my time away from creativity for so long that I became so focused on wealth and health, and it made me kind of a dull person. But when I incorporated that creativity back with writing and drawing and playing piano, it was amazing at how much better taking care of my those other two areas got. So I really think that those three balance so well. Take care of your health, take care of your wealth, and do something for your creativity. And that's your mind, body, spirit, I think, kind of all working together as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I like it.
That's yeah, that one. That's another good one too. There is no evidence to support the notion that life is serious, and I think that's important in my walk of life because I was so hard on myself when I was so seriously, and it's okay to like recognize maybe the joy side of things and the playful side of things, and life is supposed to be more of like dancing and being in
Mhm.
tune with the world. It doesn't have to be so rigid and serious all the time. So I think that's another key takeaway.
Um, you remind me when you mentioned that about Peter Pan.
About
We've
what
been
was it?
Peter Pan,
Okay,
the
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
movie, and it's because he didn't wanted to grow up. And recently, I think have
Mm,
connected so much with that movie, with that concept, because we are conditioned to the fact that we have to grow, and with growth, we cannot play anymore. Creativity is judged because even if you are deciding to go in a career where you are going to apply or you want to be an artist, art, music, most of the time people would judge like, what are you going to be doing for a living? That's not going to give you, the living that or the and it's like society kills our creativity or push
mm,
us to growth and not play anymore or not be, not maybe not necessarily being creative, but just playing. And with
yeah,
playing, I meaning just enjoying it with no end, with no goal, that I
yeah,
have to get money out of it. I have to, get a result or be success with it.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of time I found myself that I want to, and I try to do it, to be honest, because I'm trying to be conscious about myself, how I feel, and I have noticed that I want just to play, like I
Yeah.
don't want to grow up. But I've getting to the place where I can have both parts. So I
Exactly.
can be
Exactly.
serious about what I do, but I also can enjoy with no end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of like the secret is when you can incorporate those two together, when you can find a way to, no matter where you are, to love what's right in front of you as if it was handpicked for you, then you've loved in a great way. And it's so true. I mean, even at a young age, we're kind of conditioned to like, all right, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And society does just kind of grow. It does put added pressures, even things like inflation and the price of having your own house. I mean, back like 50 years ago, someone could work, for $12 an hour and still have a mortgage and get their own house. That's not even that's not a possibility. So I think as the wheels churn, it's like bigger, stronger, faster, and it kind of always puts that pressure on you, like, well, if you're not doing anything productive, you're falling behind.
Mhm.
Sometimes it should just be okay to like make something beautiful for the sake of making something beautiful. It doesn't have to have an, cause and effect. It doesn't have to be sold or even, recognized by other people. It can just be made just for yourself. Yeah, I think kindness can
For
go a
yourself.
long way, and kindness to yourself is where it first has to start.
No,
Yes, I
it's really
think
good.
I think I think we've kind of talked about all the key takeaways. I think probably the last one I would say is this Viktor Frankl quote. He was this guy who um, he was in the concentration camps, and he would tell his story of like those who were in the concentration camps recognized it. There were few that would do it, but there were people that were going around giving their last piece of bread to other people. And because he recognized people like that, he saw that um, no matter what you take from a human being, you still can't take their attitude, and that there's always a choice there. So his quote is, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I think that's probably my last takeaway.
Wow. No, Matt, it's been really nutritious, the conversation. Thank you so much.
Nade, thank you so much for having me. And this was such a great conversation.
I'm glad that you find it that way as well. Me too.
Yeah, I look forward
Look,
to seeing clips of this, and yeah, hopefully your listeners find it useful. And if anyone has any questions or needs help on their journey, whether it's physical, any way I can help out, feel free to reach out. My email address is just thinkfitnesslife@gmail.com.
I will share it in the social media.